BYJU'S has lost control of Akash, or at least that's what the Morning Context is saying here. They broke this story wide open, and according to them, Davidson Kempner has accused BYJU'S of financial misconduct and has reportedly taken control of the company, Akash. Now, none of the sources here that were quoted by the Morning Context wanted to be named. They all chose to stay anonymous, and also BYJU'S has come out and said that all of these reports are false. They said, "This is entirely incorrect. We request you to recheck the veracity of your information or the reliability of your source before publishing this wildly inaccurate claim." But anyways, here's the story so far. This is what we know. BYJU'S had raised 2,000 crore rupees from Davidson Kempner in debt funding, and they were authorized to spend 400 crore rupees of this to cover their operational expenses. However, according to the Morning Context, BYJU'S was allegedly able to access an additional 100 crore rupees from an escrow account, which they weren't supposed to be able to access, and they used that to cover more of their costs. Now, the Morning Context article does go into detail on how they were actually able to accomplish this. I won't cover it here, but the article elaborates saying that BYJU'S allegedly tried to cover up the fact that they had taken this 100 crore rupees out of the account. Davidson Kempner, of course, noticed right away, and this was considered a default on the loan. And also now there's more news coming out that BYJU'S has, of course, denied that the CEO and CFO at Akash have resigned from their positions. It's also explained that Davidson Kempner has asked everybody, including BYJU'S himself, to leave the board of directors of Akash so that they can take control of the company and restructure it. Now, again, BYJU'S has commented on all of this, saying that the CFO and CEO are still in their positions, they haven't resigned, and it's all business as usual. Irrespective, though, of whether or not this is actually happening at Akash, we'll put a link to this article in the description down below in case you guys want to go check it out. Davidson Kempner has not commented on this article, which again came from the Morning Context. Nobody else had reported this, so they were the first ones. BYJU'S has denied everything, and all the other sources are anonymous, so we really don't know what's going on. It's a really interesting story, but is it actually true? Nobody's quite sure. But it's really interesting that this story came out now, because at the same time, it looks like BYJU'S is trying to sell 20% of their 70% stake in Akash, and this is actually really surprising to a lot of people because everybody thought that they were planning on taking Akash public. So they bought this 70% stake for $950 million back in 2021. So if it's valued the same way at sale, this would mean that they would be making about $190 million from this 20%. Now, last we heard about Akash's IPO plans, they were planning to have a $1 billion IPO at a between $3.5 and $4 billion valuation. It's not clear now whether this is actually going to happen, whether the company will be devalued, whether they're going to be selling less stake in this IPO. We're really not sure if they're even planning on going ahead with the IPO at all, or whether the IPO itself is going to change in some form. But again, we'll keep you guys posted. Wow. Okay, so I'm filming this on a different day, on Friday. This is breaking news. The Economic Times has covered this story as well, confirming what the Morning Context had already reported, which is that, yes, Davidson Kempner is in fact reconstituting the board of Akash, and BYJU'S will be the only representative from the parent company on that board, but everyone else has been kicked out, and it looks like they're going to be replacing them with some other board members, some other representatives. We're not quite sure who those people are going to be, but this is in fact happening. This wasn't just a rumor, despite the fact that the official stance from BYJU'S until this actually kind of got out was that this is ridiculous. These claims are meritless, and this is you need to check the veracity of your facts. That's what they told the Morning Context. It just goes to show that that is the official stance in any case, no matter what the situation is from BYJU'S. They will just deny until eventually everyone finds out what the truth is, and then they just sort of are quiet after that point. So anyways, wanted to share that update with you guys. All right, next up, I want to highlight something that popped up on my feed on Twitter this last week. It kind of blew up. It got about 1 million views on Twitter, and it's all about this founder and CEO, Bridge Singh. So in a nutshell, what Bridge is saying in this viral tweet is that he visited the Bay Area, and in 3 days, he was able to learn more than he could have in 1 month back home in Bengaluru in India. And he actually spent 2 months trying to register his company in India, and it's still not done. With all that said, it looks like he may be moving back to the United States, even though he loves India and probably doesn't want to leave, but it just doesn't make sense to stay here from a business context. Now, Bridge is the founder of an AI startup, and they're specifically helping businesses to solve challenges using AI. And he actually clarified what he was talking about in this viral tweet. He followed up on it and explained what he had faced. He explained that a majority of the delay was caused by the non-functioning of the MCA portal, which if you're a founder in India, you've had to deal with this portal in the past, and it's a difficult portal to use. Let's just leave it at that. He also went into a little bit more detail on some of the specific issues that he had faced, and I won't go through all of them, but the first one definitely resonates, that the portal is just not stable. So users will get logged out, which of course impacts workflow. And there's nothing more frustrating than being in the middle of something on this portal. You're filling something out and then suddenly you just get logged out and you have to do it all over again. He followed all of this up with a third tweet saying that things are moving now. The MCA has reached out and is resolving issues, which is frustrating. I think the fact that you have to go viral on Twitter, that you have to be a squeaky wheel to get the grease, is just not the way that things should be working. People shouldn't be falling through the cracks here. There's lots of founders, tons of founders who don't have the same kind of reach on Twitter. They're not able to formulate their thoughts into a tweet. They don't go viral. And so nobody notices and they struggle for a really long time. You're going to get left behind. And that's a really frustrating reality of building a company in this country. All right, next up, speaking of GST, a quick update on the situation with that 28% tax being placed on gaming companies and what that word gaming actually means in this context. So it looks like the GST Council is actually going full steam ahead with this. They've heard people's complaints and thoughts, and they're deciding, well, we're just going to go ahead and do it. So the wording that they've chosen here is online gaming, not gambling, not fantasy sports, not games of chance. It's just gaming as a blanket term. Now, back in July when this news broke, about 30 investors had sent a letter to Prime Minister Modi, and they were actually explaining that with the current implementation of this decision, about 50 to 70% of every rupee given by gamers to these gaming platforms would be taxable, which would of course kill the entire online gambling industry and wipe out all of the investment in this space. And this is billions of dollars that we're talking about here. Dream11, for example, alone as a single company has raised $1.6 billion. Now, as a gamer myself, a proud PC gamer, I wanted to understand what they mean here by online gaming. So is it that every game that I buy from Steam in India is going to have a 28% tax? And if I want to buy any kind of cosmetics, I'm also going to have to pay 28%. Any kind of microtransactions, DLC, is that all going to be taxable too? Luckily, it doesn't seem like that's the case. So I actually found this great bite-sized podcast, and I'll put a link to it in the description down below, where the founder of Outlier Games, which is an Indian company, Harish Chengaya, he actually explained what his take on this situation is.
When we look at the news and when they say online gaming or online games XYZ happens, it only and only means RMG and fantasy sports from the Indian government's perspective. They are not talking about video games at all, or they are not talking about esports at all.
And by the way, when he says RMG, he's talking about real money gaming, right? Gaming that involves real world money, Dream11, and a lot of these other fantasy sports gambling games. Nazara Technologies also came out and made a statement about this, saying that the 28% GST will really not have much of an impact on them as a company because it only applies to RMG, which only makes up about 5.2% of their revenue. All right, next up, it looks like Binny Bansal is no longer a stakeholder in Flipkart, and neither is Accel nor Tiger Global. So up until this last week, Accel was still holding on to 1.1% of Flipkart, but now they are fully out, and their total ROI was between 1.5 and $2 billion on a $60 to $80 million investment, meaning that they have seen a between 25 and 30x ROI. Tiger Global, on the other hand, has made $3.5 billion total from selling stake in Flipkart, and Binny Bansal is said to have cashed out $1.5 billion total across his entire Flipkart journey. Now, one interesting thing to note about this recent sale is that it actually happened at a valuation of $35 billion, which is a decline from Flipkart's last valuation in 2021 of $38 billion. All right, next up, it looks like Spinny is laying off 300 employees. That's about 4.5% of their workforce. The reason that they're giving is that they want to consolidate all of their platforms and also more sharply focus their customer experience, which is definitely lacking. I actually recently tweeted about my experience with Truebill. It was a negative experience, and it did get the attention president of the company, some senior people at the company reached out to me, and they explained to me that Truebill is definitely their low-tier offering, and not just in terms of prices, but also in terms of the people on that company's team. So the staff and representatives are kind of the people that they wouldn't have normally hired for Spinny, but they're just good enough to make it into Truebill. And so these low-quality hires were actually having a negative impact on the reputation of the entire company, and so it looks like now they're changing their strategy. Also, if anyone from Spinny is watching this, I have reached out to you guys on Twitter. Never got a response back, so check your DMs. All right, next up, a very short news item on Dunzo. They have joined ONDC. They're planning to onboard 20,000 merchants in the next 45 days, and this seems like a great way for them to turn things around at the company, and I genuinely hope that this strategy works for them. All right, next up, real quick, Zomato is profitable. This is coming to us from FinTracker, by the way, and so what we can see here is that between Q4 of FY23 and Q1 of FY24, their operating revenue went up by 17.5%, while their expenses only increased by 7.4%, and this means that they actually went from a loss of 187 crore rupees to a profit of 2 crore rupees. Obviously, 2 crore rupees in profit is not a huge profit, but it is a step in the right direction, and it's also important to note that this is profit after tax. All right, next up, let's move into our funding segment here. So according to NTracker, July was a very rough month for India's startup ecosystem. Less than $500 million were raised across every startup in the country, and as far as I can tell, August isn't going much better, at least at the time of me filming this video, which is the 3rd of August. So this week in particular has been an all-time low, and I could actually only find 4 funding deals for Indian startups, bringing the total amount of funds raised this week on the time of me filming this video to $8 million. And I'm sure that that number is going to go up by Saturday when this video goes live, but at the moment, Indian startups have only raised $8 million this week. Here's what that looks like in context. This is more than double the previous worst week, which was week 3 of Q1 of FY24 when Indian startups raised $17 million. But anyways, let's talk about the companies that raised funds this week. So the leader this week was Unstop, a Delhi-based startup that connects talent, colleges, and recruiters for hiring, and they raised $5 million in their Series A. Then we have The Fuel Delivery, a Mumbai-based fuel delivery company. They raised $2 million in their pre-Series A. There's Mufin Green Finance. This is actually a public company, but I wanted to include them because otherwise this list would just be too short. They're an EV financing company, and they raised $1 million. And then there's UClick, a B2B marketplace for meat that provides fresh meat and seafood to hotels, restaurants, and other businesses, and they raised $85,000 in their angel round. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week, and I'll see you in the next one.